Welcome to Tansson TV Plus. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Mom.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Yeah, and I did want to say happy April 1st, everyone.
Yeah, happy April 1st, Brandon. What does April 1st mean?
Well, we're not fooling you around when we say that this is the 62nd anniversary of General Hospital.
Yes, happy anniversary, General Hospital.
Yes, as you know, we've been doing our weekly TV talks about General Hospital since July 2024, but we're changing it up a little bit today.
Yeah, we sure are. Today we're going to tackle the first episode of General Hospital, which premiered on April 1st in 1963.
Yes, to think the show began in 63, and this is year 62.
Yes. It's so hard to believe.
Yeah, and Mom, are you able to lead us through this first episode of the show?
Yeah, I'll talk just very briefly about what happened during this first episode. We are introduced to Steve Hardy, Jesse Brewer, Phil Brewer, and two other characters. And I mentioned those three names first because those are the three names that kind of stand out as being three of the characters that have been influential through time for General Hospital. But in this first episode, we're introduced to a patient named Angie. Angie is a young woman who is 18 years old, who was in a car accident with her boyfriend and has a lot of damage to her face. I mean, she has a lot of facial injuries, and so she is having some problems adjusting to that. She needs to undergo surgery cosmetic surgery to kind of help her out. But she is very angry with herself and really the world at this point. And then we're introduced to Steve Hardy, who is her doctor, who is taking care of her and kind of help guide her. We're introduced to Steve's girlfriend or fiance at the time. Her name is Peggy Mercer. And then we have Nurse Jessie, who a lot of people are familiar with. Jessie Brewer was the nurse at this time, and then her husband, Dr. Phil Brewer, is on the episode also. And for the most part, that is it. This episode really dealt with the character of Angie and stemmed with Steve Hardy and how she was kind of treating her as a patient.
Well, Mom, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and overall, I know we had watched this episode about this time last year, but aside from that, had you seen this episode before?
I had, but when I saw it, it was that same episode we saw last year. I saw that when it originally came on, quite a few years ago. And so I had seen, I believe it was the 30th anniversary, I believe, is when they re-aired this episode. So yes, I had seen the episode, but when I saw it, it was during the 30th year time frame.
Yeah, and I know for me, when I had watched it for the first time, truly about this time last year in 2024, I know I was definitely a bit sort of perplexed. I mean, I definitely know that any show, especially a soap opera, it's a tall task to try to start a first episode. But for a soap opera, those truly are made for you to get hooked into the action while the action's happening. And I think this practically did that.
Yeah, it did do it. And I was surprised, but it did do it because you are intrigued by Angie, the patient, and how she'll recover. We know that Steve has a love interest of Peggy, and so their relationship is at least teased a little bit. And then Jesse and Phil, we didn't quite know what was going on with them. You just kind of know that they're married and they're having some tough spots at the time. I don't necessarily know if they're bad tough spots. I just think they're having some tough spots at the time because of their work hours.
Yeah, and overall, based off of this first episode, like, how do you perceive the show going to, how the show's going to be?
Well, since I've already seen it, it's hard to kind of guess. But, I will say this. The names of like I said, Steve Hardy kind of remain throughout the time period. You could perceive a little bit that the show's going to be about patients. You could perceive that the show's going to be about the lives of the doctors, but it's all going to stem around General Hospital itself. And that's the perception of that time period, at least based upon this one episode.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about this too is that we truly are focusing on the hospital itself, not just the patients, but the staff on it, and I think the camaraderie that Dr. Hardy has with everyone and the one that Jesse has with everyone, I think is really interesting, and I can definitely see how this was the basis of the original show.
I can too. And you can see also that they were trying to get different demographics in regards to, you could see that the patient was young. She was 18, so they're trying to get that young viewer to kind of watch. And then at the same time, the doctors and the nurses on here, they're just a little older. And so they're trying to get, I guess, the professional at that point in time to maybe watch in regards to them. And so you could see that the show was trying to do, quite a few things in order to increase their audience.
Yeah, definitely. And overall, I mean, what did you think about the episode overall? Do you think it was a good first episode?
I mean, I thought it was a fine first episode. I guess in thinking about, in comparison to something today, it was not as exciting as as the soap opera would come out today. But it held its own. It didn't tease you as the soap operas do today for coming back the next day. But there was enough going on to make you say, I wonder what's going to happen with this group of people. And we did not watch the second episode. I'm not quite sure if it's anywhere to be found. I didn't, honestly, we didn't look for it. So it'd be interesting to see how they linked the first and second episode together.
Yeah, yeah. The only real tease I saw for episode two was just Angie getting frustrated and breaking the mirror at the end of the episode. But outside of that, I mean, everything was pretty straightforward. And while it may not be as exciting to today's standards, I mean, I definitely thought it was more interesting than I thought. Going into the second viewing of it, I remembered it was slower, but it held my interest more than I thought it would.
Yeah, I found that watching it the second time that I actually paid more attention to what was going on in regards to the conversations that occurred.
Yeah, and overall, do you think that this is the same show that we continue to watch now in 2025, 62 years later?
Well, no, it's not. But there's enough of a thread there to kind of keep it going. In regards to that, the show does center around the hospital, but the hospital doesn't always have to be the center. The way it was led in the premiere, you would think that the show would always take place in the hospital. And so, which is not the case now. I think there are times when the hospital probably is not shown at all. But at some point in time, they do bring it back to the hospital. Um, and so lately, we've had quite a few episodes where, of course, it does take place in the hospital, which has been nice to see. And I've noticed that lately they've made a point of putting the hospital first, meaning that they'll put the picture of the hospital out, which they haven't always done that.
Yeah, and for me, while it definitely feels like a different show, in the same regard, I feel that the way they treat the characters is, I'm not going to say 100% the same, but is similar in the sense that I feel like every character sort of gets their own depth to them, that they aren't just one dimensional characters. And you can see that where Dr. Hardy truly is shown as a really good doctor to Angie, but we see that beyond what Angie sees, Dr. Hardy's also dealing with his personal life and his date that can't ever seem to leave, because he's stuck at the hospital. So we get to see those different dimensions, and that for Angie, that even though we see her distraught and somewhat violent at times, that we get her backstory, that she was in that car accident, that she had a relationship, and so in that sense, the storytelling aspect, broadly speaking, is similar. But so I could see where that angle continues to the present day.
It does. It does. And I will say we do have one thread of a relationship that's still on the soap today, and that has to do with Elizabeth. She is the granddaughter of Audrey Hardy. Although Audrey was not in this episode, her husband Steve is there. And so they still have that thread, which is nice to see that they still have linked this family to remain at least mentioned on the show.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they continue to have that link. And I know, of course, within the decades that followed this episode, that numerous different families of the show are brought in that continue to the present day. And so, while the Hardy clan may not be the forefront of the show in the present day, nor is the hospital. in most cases. I'm glad that there is still that link though to, I mean, to show the overall, presence of these 62 years.
Yes, and of course, I will say this: even though the hospital may not be shown on a regular basis, they do make a point of having the majority of the characters be to work in the hospital. So they are employees of the hospital, whether or not they're doctors, nurses, or orderlies, or things like that. They are characters who are employees of the general hospital itself.
Yeah, and based off of just this first episode alone, would you have continued watching the show?
I would have continued watching. I'm always intrigued by soap opera, so yes, I would have continued watching it.
Yeah, and I definitely would have as well. And back then, the episodes were only half an hour long.
Yes, it was almost nice. Yes, it was only a half hour long.
Yeah, but I will say that even though it's only half hour long, is that in comparison to the sort of hour long episodes of today, that I still felt like there was quite a bit of content within this first episode, despite that there was only one and a half real storylines going on.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of content, and but they had to build up, and I thought for a show that kind of started in the middle per se, I thought that they did a nice job of introducing all the characters and kind of, in their scenes showing what they really were as a person on the show.
I absolutely agree. And while I thought most of the episode, had focused on, Dr. Hardy and of course the patient Angie, I do know that there's some other people there, but I don't know. I wasn't as like I liked them, but I didn't really, see the true presence of the other characters that were in it, just because most of the episode had just focused on that one plot line.
Yeah, I know Steve Hardy as a character, he did stand out as the one to watch.
Yeah, and Mom, is there anything else that you want to discuss for this first episode ever of General Hospital?
No, actually, Brandon, I really enjoyed rewatching it again. And for those people who have not seen it, go out and watch it. And I will say you might want to watch the 30th anniversary because they did a nice job of linking the first episode with the 30th anniversary. And so I would advise people to kind of take a look at that.
Well, that sounds good. And Mom, to close this out, I want to ask you. So, why do you think that people still tune into General Hospital today? I mean, it is currently the longest, running and still running soap opera within the United States.
Brandon, they have, even though, a lot of time has elapsed here, I will say that there's the characters they have on General Hospital have been on there, many of them for many, many years. And most of them, of course, started in the 80s and 90s. But they've had a lot of characters return, and it's been nice to watch the return of these characters and to see how they developed them throughout the years. And then the storylines. They've had some interesting storylines throughout the years too. I've watched General Hospital since let's just say the mid '80s. I've enjoyed many of the storylines that have occurred on the show. So it is plot driven, but the characters, they do a really great job of creating their characters and making them long lasting characters.
Oh, I definitely agree, and yeah, but I'm just so glad to for us to be here celebrating the 62nd anniversary of General Hospital, and I'm looking forward to to sitting down and watching the anniversary special that will be airing today on the day of the release.
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing this anniversary special too, Brandon.
Yeah, well, Mom, as I always love doing this with you, especially when we're discussing General Hospital.
Yep, same here, Brandon. And we thank everyone for joining us today.
Yes, and definitely tune into our Port Charles chats that come out every Sunday.
Yes, please do so. And we'll be talking about the anniversary special at that time.
Well, I look forward to it.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.